If this year is going to be different, it won't be because you talked more. It will be because you communicated better. Most people don't struggle with communication because they lack words. They struggle because their habits work against them. They over-explain, overreact, or over-accommodate, and then wonder why they feel misunderstood, drained, or dismissed. The truth is, communication isn't about sounding smarter or louder. It's about being clearer, calmer, and more intentional. The first habit to change is over-explaining. Over-explaining feels polite, but it often comes from insecurity. It's the instinct to justify your decisions before anyone questions them. The more you explain, the more negotiable your boundary sounds. You don't need to provide a backstory for every choice you make. Clear statements build confidence. Short sentences carry authority. When you say less, people listen more closely. The second habit to change is reacting too quickly. Immediate reactions are emotional. Intentional responses are powerful. When someone challenges you, disagrees with you, or surprises you, your first impulse may be to defend, correct, or push back. That impulse rarely leads to clarity. Pausing does. A brief pause gives your nervous system time to settle, and your words time to align with your values. Silence is not weakness, it's control. And control changes the direction of conversation. The third habit to change is softening your message until it loses meaning. Many people are afraid of being perceived as rude, so they dilute their words. They say maybe, kind of, or I guess when they mean no, or this doesn't work for me. That softness creates confusion. Directness, when delivered calmly, is respectful. It prevents misunderstandings and resentment. Saying what you mean the first time is kinder than letting frustration build later. Another shift that changes everything is how you listen. Most people listen to respond, not to understand. They're already forming their reply while the other person is still talking. Real listening requires presence. It requires letting go of control for a moment. When people feel heard, conversations soften. Defensiveness drops. And clarity emerges naturally. Listening well is one of the most underrated communication skills and one of the most impactful. Finally, understand this: volume does not equal strength. Repeating yourself louder doesn't make your point clearer. Consistency does. When your tone, words, and behavior align over time, people take you seriously. You don't need to convince. You demonstrate. You don't chase understanding. You allow it to catch up. Changing communication habits doesn't mean becoming someone else. It means removing what weakens your message. Less explaining, more clarity. Fewer reactions, more intention. Softer tone, stronger boundaries. This year, don't aim to talk more. Aim to communicate with purpose, because the strongest voice in the room is rarely the loudest, it's the clearest. If this year is going to be different, it won't be because you talked more. It will be because you communicated better. Most people don't struggle with communication because they lack words. They struggle because their habits work against them. They over-explain, overreact, or over-accommodate, and then wonder why they feel misunderstood, drained, or dismissed. The truth is, communication isn't about sounding smarter or louder. It's about being clearer, calmer, and more intentional. The first habit to change is over-explaining. Over-explaining feels polite, but it often comes from insecurity. It's the instinct to justify your decisions before anyone questions them. The more you explain, the more negotiable your boundary sounds. You don't need to provide a backstory for every choice you make. Clear statements build confidence. Short sentences carry authority. When you say less, people listen more closely. The second habit to change is reacting too quickly. Immediate reactions are emotional. Intentional responses are powerful. When someone challenges you, disagrees with you, or surprises you, your first impulse may be to defend, correct, or push back. That impulse rarely leads to clarity. Pausing does. A brief pause gives your nervous system time to settle and your words time to align with your values. Silence is not weakness, it's control. And control changes the direction of conversation. The third habit to change is softening your message until it loses meaning. Many people are afraid of being perceived as rude, so they dilute their words. They say maybe, kind of, or I guess when they mean no, or this doesn't work for me. That softness creates confusion. Directness, when delivered calmly, is respectful. It prevents misunderstandings and resentment. Saying what you mean the first time is kinder than letting frustration build later. Another shift that changes everything is how you listen. Most people listen to respond, not to understand. They're already forming their reply while the other person is still talking. Real listening requires presence. It requires letting go of control for a moment. When people feel heard, conversations soften, defensiveness drops, and clarity emerges naturally. Listening well is one of the most underrated communication skills and one of the most impactful. Finally, understand this: volume does not equal strength. Repeating yourself louder doesn't make your point clearer. Consistency does. When your tone, words, and behavior align over time, people take you seriously. You don't need to convince. You demonstrate. You don't chase understanding. You allow it to catch up. Changing communication habits doesn't mean becoming someone else. It means removing what weakens your message. Less explaining, more clarity, fewer reactions, more intention, softer tone, stronger boundaries. This year, don't aim to talk more. Aim to communicate with purpose. Because the strongest voice in the room is rarely the loudest, it's the clearest. Stop explaining yourself more than necessary. This habit feels harmless, even considerate, but it quietly weakens how others receive you and how you experience yourself. Over-explaining often comes from a desire to be understood, approved of, or seen as reasonable. Yet, the more you justify your choices, the more you signal uncertainty. You turn a clear decision into an open discussion. What begins as communication slowly becomes negotiation. When you explain excessively, you hand over control of the conversation. Instead of stating what works for you, you invite others to evaluate, question, and reinterpret it. This isn't because people are malicious. It's because language shapes expectations. Long explanations suggest flexibility. Short, clear statements suggest confidence. People respond to what they sense, not just what they hear. Over-explaining is often rooted in past experiences. Maybe you weren't believed. Maybe you had to defend your needs to be taken seriously. Maybe being misunderstood once taught you to overcompensate forever. Those patterns make sense, but they don't serve you now. You no longer need to earn permission for your boundaries through logic or detail. Your needs don't become more valid because you explain them well. There's also emotional labor hidden in over-explaining. Each added sentence is an attempt to manage how someone else feels about your decision. You soften, justify, reassure, and clarify, hoping to prevent discomfort. But discomfort is not always a problem to solve. Sometimes it's simply a reaction others must process on their own. Carrying that weight for them exhausts you and blurs your message. Clear communication respects both sides. It respects you by honoring your time and energy. It respects others by trusting them to handle straightforward information without being convinced. When you say less, you give your words room to land. Silence after a clear statement isn't awkward, it's powerful. It allows the other person to respond honestly rather than react to a flood of reasoning. Many people worry that stopping over-explaining will make them seem cold or unkind. In reality, clarity is kinder than confusion. Over-explaining often creates mixed signals. You say no, then explain so much that it sounds like maybe. You set a boundary, then soften it until it barely exists. That inconsistency frustrates everyone involved, including you. There's a difference between clarity and defensiveness. Clarity is calm and steady. Defensiveness rushes and over-details. When you feel the urge to keep talking, pause and ask yourself why. Are you adding information because it's necessary, or because you want reassurance? Most of the time, the first sentence was enough. This doesn't mean you never explain. Context matters. Healthy communication includes explanation when it builds understanding. The key is intention. Explain to inform, not to convince. Explain to clarify, not to justify. Once clarity is reached, stop. Repeating the same point in different words doesn't make it stronger, it makes it sound uncertain. As you practice saying less, you may notice discomfort at first. Silence might feel risky. You might fear being judged or misunderstood. Let that feeling pass. With time, you'll notice how people adjust. Conversations become simpler. Boundaries become clearer. And you begin to trust yourself more, because you're no longer talking yourself out of your own decisions. Stopping over-explaining also strengthens your presence. People listen differently when your words are deliberate. You don't rush. You don't fill space unnecessarily. That steadiness communicates self-respect without saying a word. It shows that you're comfortable with your choices, even if others aren't yet. You don't need to narrate your reasoning to be valid. You don't need to justify your limits to be fair. You don't need to exhaust yourself to be understood. Speak clearly. Say what you mean, then let it stun. Replace emotional reactions with intentional pauses. This shift alone can change the outcome of almost every difficult conversation you have. Emotional reactions are fast, automatic, and driven by the nervous system. They happen before you've had time to think, assess, or choose. Pauses, on the other hand, create space. They slow the moment down long enough for you to respond with clarity instead of impulse. When something unexpected or triggering is said, your body reacts first. Your heart rate changes, your breath shortens, and your mind races to defend, explain, or correct. In that state, words come out sharp or scattered. You may say more than you mean or less than you need to. An intentional pause interrupts that pattern. It gives your body time to settle, so your words can align with your values rather than your emotions. Pausing doesn't mean disengaging. It means staying present without being reactive. A brief silence can feel uncomfortable, especially if you're used to filling space. But that discomfort is temporary, and the benefits are lasting. In a pause, you regain control of your tone. You choose your language. You decide whether the conversation needs correction, clarification, or simply listening. Many people fear that pausing will make them seem unsure or weak. In reality, it often has the opposite effect. Pauses signal confidence. They show that you are not rushing to prove yourself or defend your position. They shift the energy of the conversation. The other person senses that you're thinking, not reacting. That alone can lower intensity and prevent escalation. Emotional reactions often pull conversations off course. One defensive comment leads to another, and soon the original issue is buried under misunderstandings and regret. Pauses keep conversations focused. They allow you to respond to what was actually said, not what you feared it meant. That distinction matters more than most people realize. Intentional pauses also protect your relationships. Many conflicts aren't caused by what's said, but by how quickly it's said. A pause gives you the chance to choose kindness without sacrificing honesty. You can still be direct. You can still disagree, but your words land differently when they come from a regulated state. Pausing helps you listen better too. When you're not preparing your response while the other person speaks, you hear more clearly. You notice tone, intention, and emotion. This deeper listening often reveals that a strong reaction isn't necessary. Sometimes what felt like an attack was actually insecurity or misunderstanding. There's also self-respect in pausing. It communicates that your response is worth considering. You don't rush to meet expectations or soothe discomfort. You take the time you need. That boundary may feel subtle, but it's powerful. It reinforces that you are in charge of your reactions, not at the mercy of them. Learning to pause is a practice. It won't feel natural at first. You may still react emotionally sometimes. That's okay. Awareness is the first step. Even a 1-second pause is progress. Over time, those pauses grow longer and more intentional, and with them comes clarity. Pauses don't silence your emotions, they organize them. You still feel what you feel. You just don't let those feelings speak for you. That distinction changes everything. It turns conversations from battles into exchanges. It turns tension into information. When you replace emotional reactions with intentional pauses, you stop giving your power away in moments of pressure. You become steadier, clearer, and more grounded. And that calm presence often does more to shape the conversation than any perfectly chosen sentence ever could. Say what you mean without softening it into confusion. This principle sounds simple, but it challenges a habit many people have spent years developing. From an early age, we learn to cushion our words to avoid discomfort. We add qualifiers, soften statements, and leave room for interpretation so no one feels offended. The intention is kindness, but the result is often misunderstanding. When your message is wrapped in too many layers, its meaning gets lost. Softening language can blur boundaries. When you say maybe, kind of, or I'm not sure, but you create uncertainty even when you feel certain inside. The listener hears flexibility where you intended clarity. This leads to crossed expectations and quiet frustration. You believe you were clear. They believe you were open. Neither is wrong, but the communication failed. Clear communication doesn't require harshness. It requires alignment between your thoughts and your words. Saying what you mean means choosing language that reflects your actual position, not a diluted version of it. When you do this calmly and respectfully, your message lands without confusion. People know where you stand, and you don't have to keep clarifying later. Many people soften their words out of fear of being disliked, fear of conflict, fear of seeming rude, but avoiding clarity doesn't eliminate conflict, it delays it. Confusion resurfaces later as resentment, repeated conversations, or broken trust. Directness, delivered with calm, prevents those issues before they grow. There is also self-trust built into speaking plainly. When you stop softening your message, you honor your own perspective. You stop second-guessing yourself in real time. That internal alignment creates confidence. Not the loud kind, but the steady kind that others feel immediately. Softened communication often places emotional labor on the listener. They are left to interpret tone, guess intent, and read between the lines. This creates unnecessary mental work and increases the chance of misinterpretation. Clear words remove that burden. They are respectful because they don't require translation. It's important to distinguish softness from kindness. Kindness considers impact. Softness avoids responsibility. You can be kind and direct at the same time. You can say no without apology. You can disagree without attack. You can state a boundary without over-explaining. The key is tone, not dilution. Saying what you mean also reduces repetition. When messages are unclear, they need to be revisited. You end up having the same conversation multiple times, each one more frustrating than the last. Clear communication the first time saves time, energy, and emotional strain. As you practice this habit, you may notice discomfort at first. People accustomed to vague responses may be surprised by your clarity. Some may test it, others may respect it immediately. Both reactions are normal. What matters is that you stay consistent. Clarity becomes your baseline. This habit doesn't mean you say everything that crosses your mind. It means you choose words intentionally. You speak with purpose. You remove unnecessary qualifiers and trust that your message can stand on its own. Silence becomes an option again. You no longer feel the need to keep talking to ensure understanding. When you say what you mean without softening it into confusion, conversations become simpler. Boundaries become clearer. Relationships become healthier. You spend less time managing misunderstandings and more time building genuine connection. Clarity is not aggressive. It is generous. It gives others the gift of knowing where you stand, and it gives you the peace of knowing you didn't betray your truth in the process. Listen to understand, not to respond. This shift sounds subtle, but it changes the entire quality of your communication. Most people listen with an internal agenda. While the other person is speaking, they're already forming a reply, a defense, or a counterpoint. In those moments, listening becomes a pause between turns rather than an act of presence. Understanding gets sacrificed for speed. When you listen only to respond, you miss context. You hear words, but not meaning. You focus on what to say next instead of what's being said now. This creates conversations where both people talk, but neither feels heard. The result is frustration, repetition, and emotional distance. Listening to understand requires slowing down internally. It means letting go of control for a moment and allowing the other person's perspective to exist without interruption. That doesn't mean you agree. It means you're willing to receive information before reacting to it. This type of listening lowers defensiveness and opens space for honesty. One of the biggest obstacles to listening is ego. We want to be right. We want to be seen as capable and intelligent. So we rush to clarify, correct, or explain. But understanding doesn't threaten competence. In fact, it strengthens it. When you fully understand a situation, your response becomes more effective and more precise. Listening to understand also requires emotional regulation. If something triggers you, your instinct may be to interrupt or defend. Pausing in those moments is crucial. Letting the other person finish doesn't mean you accept blame or surrender your position. It simply means you value clarity over control. There is trust built into being heard. When people feel genuinely listened to, their tone softens. Their defensiveness drops. Conversations that could escalate instead de-escalate. This doesn't happen because you said the perfect thing. It happens because you created space for expression. Another benefit of listening to understand is that it reveals what's actually important. Often, the first thing someone says isn't the core issue. As they continue, patterns and emotions emerge. If you're already responding in your head, you miss those cues. Deep listening uncovers the real conversation beneath the surface. This habit also improves your responses. When you finally speak, your words are more relevant. You address what matters instead of reacting to assumptions. This saves time and prevents misunderstandings. Fewer corrections are needed because the response is grounded in comprehension, not reaction. Listening to understand doesn't mean staying silent forever. It means choosing the right moment to speak. It means asking clarifying questions instead of making assumptions. It means reflecting back what you heard to ensure accuracy. These practices show respect and create alignment. Many people fear that listening deeply will weaken their position. In reality, it strengthens it. You become informed rather than reactive. You respond with insight instead of impulse. This kind of presence commands respect without demanding it. As you practice this habit, conversations may feel slower at first. That slowness is a sign of depth, not inefficiency. With time, communication becomes smoother because fewer misunderstandings need repair. Listening to understand transforms communication from competition into connection. It replaces urgency with intention. And it reminds you that being heard starts with being willing to hear. Listen to understand, not to respond. This principle sounds simple, yet it challenges one of the most common habits in communication. Most people listen with their reply already forming. While the other person is still speaking, the mind races ahead preparing a defense, a correction, or a story of its own. In that moment, listening becomes a waiting game, not an act of presence. The goal shifts from understanding to winning a turn, and real connection quietly slips away. When you listen only to respond, you hear selectively. You catch the parts that trigger you, and miss the parts that explain them. Words are filtered through assumptions instead of curiosity. This is why conversations often feel repetitive. Each person believes they've explained themselves clearly, yet nothing changes because neither side truly received the full message. Listening to understand requires a different posture. It means staying with what's being said without rushing to shape it into something you can answer. It means allowing silence while someone gathers their thoughts. That silence can feel uncomfortable, especially if you're used to filling space quickly. But in that space, clarity begins to form. One of the biggest barriers to understanding is emotional urgency. When you feel challenged, criticized, or misunderstood, your nervous system shifts into protection mode. You want to correct the record immediately. You want to explain yourself. But reacting too quickly often leads to misalignment. Slowing down helps your body settle, so your mind can actually absorb information. Listening to understand does not mean agreeing or conceding. It means you value accuracy over speed. You want to know what the other person is really saying before you decide how to respond. This approach prevents unnecessary conflict. Many disagreements escalate simply because people respond to what they think was said, not what actually was. There is also a humility in listening. It requires setting aside the need to be right long enough to be informed. That doesn't weaken your position, it strengthens it. When you respond from understanding, your words are sharper, calmer, and more relevant. You're no longer reacting to fragments. You're addressing the full picture. People feel the difference when they're listened to deeply. Their tone softens. Their explanations become clear. Defensiveness drops. This isn't because you solved anything yet, but because you showed respect. Feeling heard often matters more than being agreed with. It creates safety, and safety invites honesty. Listening to understand also reveals subtext. You begin to notice emotions behind the words fear, frustration, uncertainty. Those signals are easy to miss when you're focused on replying, yet they often explain more than the words themselves. When you recognize them, you can respond with empathy instead of assumption. Another benefit of this habit is fewer regrets. When you speak after fully listening, you're less likely to wish you'd said something differently. Your response is grounded, not reactive. You don't replay the conversation later wondering if you misunderstood. That peace of mind is valuable. This habit takes practice. You may catch yourself interrupting mentally or preparing responses too soon. When you notice that, return your attention to the speaker. Listen for meaning, not just words. Ask yourself what they need to be understood in this moment. Over time, listening to understand becomes natural. Conversations become more productive and less draining. You spend less energy defending and more energy connecting. Misunderstandings decrease because clarity increases. Listening is not passive. It is an active choice to value understanding over immediacy. And when you make that choice consistently, your communication becomes calmer, clearer, and far more effective. Let consistency, not volume, carry your message. This idea challenges the belief that being heard requires being loud. Many people raise their voice, repeat themselves, or escalate emotionally because they feel ignored. They assume intensity equals impact. But in communication, volume often signals frustration, not authority. Consistency, on the other hand, builds credibility quietly and over time. When your message stays the same across moments, moods, and situations, people begin to trust it. They know what to expect from you. Your words don't shift based on pressure or convenience. That steadiness is powerful because it removes confusion. People may not always like what you say, but they understand where you stand. Volume can create temporary attention. Consistency creates lasting influence. A loud response might dominate a moment, but it rarely changes behavior long term. Consistency shapes expectations. It teaches others how to engage with you without requiring constant reminders or emotional effort. Consistency also protects your energy. When you repeat yourself louder or more forcefully, you drain yourself trying to be convincing. You feel the need to push your point again and again. But when your actions, tone, and boundaries align consistently, you don't need to push. Your message is already clear. Silence becomes enough. There is confidence in consistency. You don't chase agreement or demand validation. You let time and repetition do the work. Over time, people realize that your standards don't bend easily. That realization earns respect far more reliably than raised voices ever could. Many people increase volume when they feel unseen. But being seen doesn't come from intensity, it comes from reliability. When your behavior matches your words every time, people stop testing your limits. They listen the first time because they know the message won't change. Consistency also creates emotional safety. Others don't have to guess which version of you they'll encounter. You're not calm one day and reactive the next. That predictability makes communication smoother and less tense. It builds trust without effort. This doesn't mean you never express emotion. It means emotion doesn't replace clarity. You can speak firmly without shouting. You can be passionate without being reactive. Your tone stays steady because your message is grounded. Letting consistency carry your message requires patience. Results aren't immediate. You may feel tempted to raise your voice when change doesn't happen right away. But consistency works quietly. It reshapes dynamics slowly but deeply. When you commit to consistency, you stop performing for the moment and start building for the long term. You no longer need to convince. You demonstrate. Your presence becomes your proof. Volume fades quickly. Consistency stays. And over time, it speaks louder than any raised voice ever could.